My name is Dave Wilhelm. I am an associate professor in the Business Administration Department at Wake Technical Community College in Raleigh, North Carolina. This video is a 1-hour introduction to entrepreneurship. It's based in large part on Wake Tech's Business 139, Entrepreneurship I, and the Business 245, Entrepreneurship II courses. The video covers some of the disciplines that are useful for a potentially successful entrepreneur and concludes with the description of our Business 245 business plan. These are the topics we will cover in the presentation. The first column and most of the second column are the various disciplines that will be useful in starting and running a business. The last item on the second column is the business plan itself, which we will also be covering. I will not run down the list of topics right here. There's no need to mention them all. If you want to look at them at this time, you can pause the video and look at them. But for us, let's just move ahead. This is the business world that we exist in. What we want is some people who will give us money for our product, whether it's a good or service. And there are two elements required for a market. One is people who want and need our product. And the other is people who can afford it and are willing to pay for it. The way we attract that target market is through a product at a price that we promote and then finally get it to the customer. Those are the 4 P's. More recently, someone has come up with the 4 C's, which rather than just the product, focus on the customer. In addition to just the price, consider all the costs for both the producer and the consumer. Rather than one-directional promotion, consider two-directional communication. And for the place or distribution, think of convenience. We just have one big outer circle of the environment. You can divide that into 2 sub-environments. The micro-environment of suppliers, customers, and competitors that affects us every day, usually minor rather than major concerns. The macro environment, laws, economy, technology, demographics, and social values probably don't affect us that often, but when they do, it can be a very large effect. So that's the business world that an entrepreneur exists in. The business process itself, many diagrams for that. Here's one that I like. It separates the business process into an entrepreneurship process and a management process. The entrepreneurship process gets it started. The management process keeps it going. The entrepreneurship process may consist of innovation, a triggering event, an implementation, or actually doing it, whereas the management process manages the growth of an organization, its maturity, and finally harvest, where the entrepreneur removes himself from the organization, hopefully with some financial rewards attached. One thing to stress here is there is not a group of individuals who are entrepreneurs and another who are managers. It's primarily focusing on the process, not the individual. So the same individual, when they're starting a business, will be doing entrepreneurship things, and after they've got the business growing, they will be doing management things. The way an organization makes revenue we call business or revenue models. It can be through sales of a product, a service, information. It can be license fees for software, a business process, which we also call a franchise. Referral, where we refer a client to someone else who will actually provide a product or service and we get a fee for that. Subscription, a fee for using something over a period of time, generally magazines, newspapers, business services. Advertising is where you get paid for letting someone put commercial messages on your newspaper or website. Free then fee. Online newspapers often give a bit of information, and if you would like the whole article, that will be a few cents or dollars. Video games are now into this, where you can play a video game, and if you want to jump some levels or get better weapons, you pay a fee. And finally, another way to get revenue is through donations or grants if you are a nonprofit organization. Product. Generally, a product can be a tangible good or an intangible service. Either way, it's something you have or can do that people will give you money for. Features and benefits. A feature is what the producer puts into the product. A benefit is what the consumer gets out of it. For instance, I have an 8 gigabyte flash drive. The producer made this flash drive with 8 gigabytes, and that's all very nice, but the reason it's important to me is that I can store 2,500 MP3 music files on it. Total product offer includes everything you get with the product, both tangible and intangible, certainly the product itself, perhaps pleasant surroundings as you shop, a warranty, delivery. All those things either consciously or unconsciously go through our mind when we're looking for a product. Even more important is the value proposition, which is the net value. Basically, the total product offer, everything you get, minus the cost to acquire that, both financial costs as well as time costs, bother costs. A continuum showing the types of ownership of an organization. Except for a sole proprietorship, each of these must be registered with the State Secretary of State, and even for a sole proprietorship, there may be some requirements that have to be registered. Sole proprietorship, one person owns it. A general partnership consists of 2 or more persons contributing time and money and deriving the benefits from the general partnership. All of them have unlimited liability. If they accept some passive investments from persons who would like to invest in the partnership, those partners are called limited partners, and then we change the terminology of the partnership to a limited partnership. A limited liability company is one of the more recent forms of ownership and is very popular. An S corporation and a limited liability company each have the advantages of limited liability and single taxation. If you need a large investment and a large number of employees, you may need to incorporate as a C corporation. The order of these ownership forms is purposeful. The sole proprietorship and a general partnership Each of those owners has unlimited liability, but only single taxation. For the limited partnership, the general partners have the unlimited liability and single taxation. The limited partners have limited liability and single taxation. More on the LLC and the S Corp in a moment. The C Corp, the owners of a C Corp, also called shareholders, they all have limited liability, but we have something called double taxation, which actually refers to the C corporation being taxed as its own entity, and then when the earnings or dividends are distributed to the owners, shareholders, they are taxed on those earnings again. An S corporation first has to be a C corporation. And of course, the advantage to an S corporation over a C corporation is single taxation. There are a few requirements. First, a C corp. Then, if you have 100 or fewer shareholders, a single stock class, and at least 75% of your revenue is due to things you're doing rather than investments in other organizations, you can be an S corp. The LLC, limited liability company, does not have to first be a C corporation, so it saves quite a bit of paperwork. It has more flexible ownership, is non-transferable, and because of that, it has a limited life if one of the owners wants to leave or they want to add more owners. And it actually has tax flexibility. Generally, you would elect for the flow-through taxation, that is not double taxation, but if you wanted to be taxed differently, you could. I have no idea why anybody would want to. There are some legal requirements for any business, including, in many cases, a sole proprietorship. You do have to register with the state, both state and federal sales tax, maybe some licenses or certifications depending on the business you're in. Then there are some laws, both state, federal, maybe some county and municipal requirements as well. Certainly the unemployment fund, a workers' compensation fund. Everybody has to conform to the Fair Labor Standards Act, the Equal Pay Act, Immigration Reform and Control Act, the Federal Insurance Contributions Act, also known as Social Security. Once you reach a certain number of employees, some other requirements come into effect. Occupational Safety and Health Act, recording and reporting, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, COBRA, having to do with insurance if you leave an organization, the Family and Medical Leave Act, Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, and the Employee Retirement Security Act. I think you can see why some small businesses do need help getting started with all of the legal requirements to get a business going. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to make some revenue, but both so we understand what we're up to and so our employees as well. Probably you should have a mission statement, and this says, why are you doing this? What is your purpose? And generally it's composed of active verbs such as our mission is to, and some examples are, to improve and enrich, to provide, to create, to enable. The other important statement is a vision statement, which is the goal or objective for the future, whether that be 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. Generally, this uses to be verbs as opposed to the mission statement, which uses action verbs. Perhaps our vision is to be the preferred provider, to become the world's leader. A couple other items that will be useful is an elevator speech, basically a 15 to 30 second spiel explaining the organization to somebody. It's not primarily pushing the product or being a sales pitch. It's explaining the organization, who you are, what you do. And finally, a tagline, a memorable one-liner that people can remember. The military's be all you can be. Wendy's, where's the beef? Something that's going to stick in people's minds so they will remember you. Goal setting and strategies. Along with that mission statement and vision statement, we're going to need some goals and strategies. Goals are what we want to accomplish, and strategies are how we get there. So a goal or an objective is a desirable outcome or a result, not how you intend to get there, just the result you're after. Strategies or tactics, which lead to plans and budgets, those are how you're going to achieve the goals or objectives. So, I'm going to become a good basketball player by practicing a lot. Okay, let's parse that. The goal is to become a good basketball player. That goal is kind of general. If we add some details, then we have an objective. Goal to become a good basketball player. Objective to score 10 points a game and get 3 rebounds. Now we're specific. We can really tell if we actually made it or not. To accomplish those goals, we need a plan. This is what we're going to do. Once we commit resources, then it's a budget. So a plan is what we would like to do. A budget is how we're actually going to commit resources to accomplish it. So becoming that good basketball player, we've got our specific objective. The budget, the resources we're going to commit, may be to practice 1 hour per day. It is important to understand your industry and your competition or competitors for both cooperative and competitive strategic reasons. An industry, my favorite definition, is a distinct group of productive organizations, not necessarily profit-making. And what makes them a distinct group is their common elements, the set of products, markets, customers, concerns, and interests that they share. To determine who your competition or competitors are, see immediately above. Those other organizations with similar products, markets, customers, concerns, and interests. And they're not only competitors, they do have a lot of the same concerns. Generally, the organizations in an industry will have a number of cooperative areas. They probably form a trade group, perhaps have a monthly or quarterly magazine, oftentimes have conferences, trade shows, and they definitely pool their resources to hire some lobbyists to try and get laws and regulations as favorable as possible. What if you've got your idea and your product and you've looked around, checked the North American Industry Classification System, perhaps Googled your product, and you don't find any information? Two possibilities. One, you have a fantastic new idea, or maybe there is no market for whatever you're trying to do. Something called SWOT analysis, SWOT, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This looks at the positive and negatives of your organization, both internally and externally. If you have control over it, it's probably an internal element, something that you can do something about. If you don't have control, it's more likely an external element that you will just have to perhaps develop some contingency plans for. Internal positives we call strengths: low cost and high quality manufacturing, brand name recognition, product innovation, R&D capabilities. Internal negatives we call weaknesses: high manufacturing costs, too narrow a product line, underutilized plant capacity so you're running inefficiently. Externally, we have no control over these. We just have to go with them. External positives we call opportunities, such as rising consumer demand, new geographic markets, falling trade barriers in foreign markets. External negatives we call threats: entry of new competitors, adverse demographic changes, foreign restrictive trade policies. Well, so what? So the internal positives, the strengths, we can enjoy those, but don't sit back and enjoy them. Enjoy them and enhance, because you need to maintain those strengths, especially relative to your competitors. Those internal negatives, the weaknesses, either fix or somehow minimize those. The external positives, the possible opportunities, develop a positive contingency plan. The external negatives, those threats, well, develop a defensive contingency plan so that if they do happen, either the opportunities or threats, you have at least the start of a response to those. A target market. I mentioned this earlier. 2 requirements: people who want and need our product, and people who can afford to purchase our product. In the case of a nonprofit, the second one probably converts to something like, so somebody will pay us for doing it. Target market, these are the people we focus on. We'll sell to anybody, but where the most effectiveness and efficiency will come in is targeting those people with the greatest need or want, easiest affordability, they're reachable. Effectiveness and efficiency can especially be realized in the area of promotion, just being able to find them. And we can adjust the 4 P's or the 4 C's, that marketing mix, in order to appeal to those people in the target market. Keep in mind there may be a difference between the customer and the payer versus the consumer and the user. Especially for nonprofit target markets, we will have one group of consumers, users, recipients, and another group who will be the donors or the purchasers. To identify and isolate the target market, we can use segmentation, fancy word for splitting them up. We can do this demographically by who we are: sex, age, education, ethnicity, our life stage, our income, our family size, probably quite a few others. Geographic segmentation is the region we live in, the density, urban or rural, the hemisphere, perhaps the type of government. Demogeographic is just the combination of demographic and geographic. 50-year-old men living in New York City would be an example. Then there's psychographic, our personality, the values and lifestyle that different people have. And then the benefit. Remember, producers put in features, consumers get benefits. So convenience or durability or economy, health, safety, status. For instance, a motor scooter in one area could be for recreation, and another it could be the basic family transportation. And finally, the last type of segmentation on my list is volume. People who buy a lot of the stuff or people who just buy it occasionally. Now that we have identified our target markets, we can design our promotion to target those people. Couple things in mind. What we want to tell them about are our total product offering, everything they get, and the value proposition, what they're going to get, less what it's going to cost them to get it. The promotion methods and media that companies generally use are these: personal selling, individual to individual, face to face, over the phone; advertising, paid, impersonal, but can be targeted by selecting the appropriate magazines, newspapers, TV channels; public relations and publicity. Public relations, where we're generally trying to get people to look favorably on an organization or an individual; publicity, which is free and that we don't have to pay for it as advertising, but we do not have control over it. We can provide it to the media and they will use it as they wish. Sales promotions typically go after short-term sales, 2-day sales, coupons in the paper that are good for a limited time, placards in the store saying special today. Guerrilla marketing, generally imaginative and inexpensive methods, thinking of posters on a telephone pole. Word of mouth is what we'd all like. Of course, word of mouth is not automatic. You have to do something to generate that word of mouth to get it going. A basic promotional set, in my mind, is a business card and a website, where the business card has some minimal set of information so that the recipient knows who you are and what you can do for them, with a link to the website, where the website can be either an information display website or an e-commerce website. Information display websites are fairly simple. Just about anyone can set those up using HTML code or some of the what you see is what you get tools. E-commerce websites are a little more complicated in that you can actually sell stuff on an e-commerce website. For this, you need a catalog, a shopping cart, and a payment method. Regardless of your website type, the problem is how to get traffic. You cannot rely on somebody Googling your topic and showing up in the first 10 URLs. Break-even analysis answers the question, how many do I have to make and sell to break even? I'm not going to make money, nor am I going to lose money. What do I have to make and sell to break even? This is the first really important question. The second one being, will I be able to sell that many? So the basic break-even formula is quantity break-even equals fixed cost divided by the margin. In other words, how many do I have to sell and make so much on each one that I cover my fixed costs? Margin might be expressed by selling price minus variable cost, also called markup unit profit. It does assume a single product, no inventory, make what you sell, and no quantity discounts, either for purchasing raw materials or for selling. If there are multiple products of known proportions, it is possible to have a closed form solution. Most organizations, though, have enough variations in their products that rather than try and force a closed form solution, just use an Excel spreadsheet. Here's a diagram of spreadsheet break-even analysis, and the column IDs are the product identification, the number you're going to sell, the selling price, the variable costs, the margin, and the contribution of each product. You can strictly use the quantity and margin and play with the quantity until you get to where the sum of the contributions is fixed costs, or you can play with the quantity and the selling price, assuming the variable costs are constant, to determine the margin, or you can play with the quantity, selling price, and variable costs. But the goal is to determine what is the quantity of each product ID that you have to sell to break even. On the lower right-hand side, we sum the contributions, we enter the fixed costs, and we compare the two. And what we're looking for is when are the net earnings equal to zero, and of course that's when the sum of those contributions equal the fixed costs. The second question, market research, is going to answer, can we sell that break-even quantity? What we have to consider is who to ask, what to ask, and how to ask. Certainly who to ask is our target market people. What to ask are things like, how many would you like? What are you willing to pay? How to ask could be a survey, a questionnaire, interviews. The initial exploratory research generally consists of secondary data, information that's already out there, perhaps a focus group, 6 to 12 people with the moderator talking about the product, expert interviews. Exploratory research is generally qualitative with a small number of respondents and open-ended questions such as, what sort of toppings do you like on your pizza? Descriptive or conclusive research comes after the initial exploratory research when we understand what we should be asking. These are almost always questionnaires, observations, perhaps experiments. Descriptive, conclusive research is generally quantitative with a large number of respondents, and closed-ended questions such as, from these 6 toppings, select the ones you would like on your pizza. Keep in mind correlation versus cause and effect. Just because 2 things happen together doesn't mean that one causes the other. There's a type of research called constant sum research, which looks at the relative importance of characteristics. Everybody would like their restaurant to serve super good food with extremely friendly service at very inexpensive prices. Constant sum research looks at which one of those 3 is most important, so the organization to decide where to put their resources. questionnaires, can be written or online, then we call it a survey. If it's verbal, we call it an interview. Both are after the same information. Pricing is one of the really important elements. They're all important, but I think pricing and promotion are very often key. Customers want to know the price before buying. If they don't see the price, they will probably figure it's too expensive and will move on. The cost to the consumer is our price plus the cost of them acquiring the product. Drive time, inconvenience, bother, picking it up, everything else in addition to our price is added to the cost to the consumer. So how do we set our price? There are a number of ways to set that, and they're not one or the other. These are all considered together with the other elements to set our price, and they are these. The floor is probably our costs, but we would also like a bit of margin, so our cost plus some % margin for some profit and to cover fixed costs. Certainly the market price comes into this. One element of the market price is certainly the competition, what they're charging, and that's not necessarily our price ceiling. If our product has some advantages over the competition's products, we could charge more. If it has some disadvantages, then we're going to have to charge less. Low prices will result in a higher volume, but a smaller per item margin. High prices, likely a lower volume, but a higher margin per item. And when we're trying to figure out the right pricing place that will give us the best volume, keep in mind that our goal is really earnings, not necessarily revenue. Revenue is how we're going to get to the earnings, but earnings is really what's most important to us. The location. Businesses have a location. For one thing, you have to register with the Secretary of State, but for another thing, you need a place to work. Even if your product is a website, you still have to work somewhere. It could be home. It could be an administrative office. It could be a service office, and this would differ depending on whether the service were done at this location or just done at the customer location. We might need room for product or equipment storage. If it's a retail location, now we probably want to be where the customers are. This could be a mall, standalone town center, a flea market, a craft fair, other opportunities. I don't expect most startup small businesses will be doing their own manufacturing, since contract manufacturing is very common and handy to do. But if you are going to do your own manufacturing, it could be anywhere from a large factory to a workroom in the home. Supply chain management is kind of fancy terminology for getting the stuff we need and distributing the stuff we've done and made to our customers. So we're the organization there. We're the ones who are doing stuff. And we need suppliers who are going to provide us with the raw materials. Dealing with the suppliers, we will be ordering, receiving, paying, putting some in inventory, taking stuff out of inventory to use it. We do stuff depending on the size of our business and the nature of our business. We may go through wholesalers and or retailers, or we may deal directly with the customer. Regardless of what group we're dealing with directly, they are going to be ordering from us. We will be shipping. We will be collecting payment. And we may have to deal with returns. Very briefly, the supply chain encompasses everything from our suppliers to our customers. The distribution channel encompasses just our organization to our customers. Objectives. Objectives are results we want to accomplish, not how we accomplish them. How we accomplish them are plans. What we want to accomplish are objectives. Goals and objectives are generally used interchangeably if you want to be picky, and you probably should be picky at least occasionally. A goal is a vaguely defined desired result. Going to be hard to tell if you actually achieved it or not. An objective is a precisely defined desired result. You can tell if you actually made an objective or not. Generally, objectives need to have the characteristics of specific, measurable or quantitative, with a time element. If you know the organization or the individual, an objective should also be achievable and relevant. An example of a goal: win a lot of basketball games. To convert this to an objective for the regular season conference basketball games, notice that this excludes out-of-conference games and any playoff games, just regular season conference. Win 80% or better of these, and for the 2015 to 2016 regular season. In this case, the time frame does not have a deadline, it has a period. So you can tell if you made the objective, the goal, kind of wishy-washy there. If you're going to have a business, you really need a timeline. There are a number of quotes that most sound a little bit like this: an objective without a deadline is just a dream. So the objectives in the timeline can be either a list. I'm showing here objectives 1 through 4 with dates 1 through 4, and the first two are checked off, so must have accomplished those. Or it could be a timeline, objectives 1 through 5 and dates 1 through 5, where the first two are shaded in, so again, we must have accomplished those. The format doesn't matter. List, a timeline in graphical form, just get them written so you know what they are and you can hold yourself to them. Staffing. Is it likely that you will need some people to help you in the business? Not everybody will need anybody working for them. Arts and crafts people in particular generally spend their time making things, perhaps selling them online, perhaps selling them at arts and crafts fairs. If you do need people, what is it you need them to do? What kind of people do you need? And how will you acquire them? Word of mouth, a sign, an online posting, a resume, application, background check that it's legal for them to work, perhaps some sort of test, performance test, an interview, some process. Generally, the documentation will consist of a job title, a job description, and a job or person specification. The job description, the duties and responsibilities. What is it you want them to do? Perhaps demonstrate products, work a cash register, create advertising copy. Just describe what it is are the duties and responsibilities. The other part, the job or person specification, describes the type of person who is probably qualified to do that. Characteristics of an individual who can perform the job description. It may include education, years of experience, definitely not age, sex, nationality, origin, color, or religion. Financial statements, we are talking about a business, so we do need to understand if we're making a profit. The main three financial statements are earnings statement, cash flow statement, and a balance sheet. The earnings statement, also known as income, profit, profit and loss, P&L, revenue. I prefer earnings statement. These are for a time period, typically a quarter or a fiscal year. The earnings statement equation, earnings equals revenue minus expenses. The earnings statement is fairly easy. It reflects the activities. The cash flow statement is also for a time period. The cash flow equation is ending cash equals beginning cash plus receipts minus disbursements. Revenue versus receipts. The difference between the earnings statement and the cash flow statement is that the activity is reflected in the earnings statement when you've earned it, either by finishing a job, delivering a product, or whatever. The cash flow statement reflects when you receive the cash. For a new business, the cash flow statement is probably the most important statement. You can survive with a negative earnings statement or an ugly balance sheet, but if you don't have cash, you're out of business. The balance sheet is at a point in time, typically the end of a month, a quarter, a fiscal year. Assets equals liabilities plus owner's equity. The earnings, cash flow, and balance sheet statements are certainly useful historically, but they're also, for the business planning, even more useful if they're looking forward, ahead, called pro forma or project-oriented, especially for a business plan. When you don't have an earnings history, you want to be able to show people what you expect to happen in the future. Unless you're really good and enjoy accounting, you probably want to hire an accountant or purchase an accounting package to keep track of all these items and to make sure they're legally acceptable to people like the federal government and state, to whom we hope to be making enough profit to pay taxes. The business plan. The business plan is how we tell people what our business plans are. There is no ideal business plan template that we can use. If you Google business plan, you get, well, I got 524 million results. Probably some duplicates, but that's an awful lot. What's got to be in the business plan is what you're going to do. And that's probably mission and vision statements. Who will pay you to do it is also important. We call that the target market. Why it will be successful, what are your marketing 4 Ps, and the financial sections. The rest probably depends on you and the nature of the business. Who should you get to write it for you? Well, the entrepreneur, him or herself, should be the primary author. And the written information is good. It reminds us what we were thinking about at one time, but the process we went through is just as important. The length, maybe 25 to 100 pages. Help? Well, we're going to be the primary author, but particularly for the legal and accounting aspects, it may be a good idea to hire some help in these areas. There is all sorts of help and advice available, some paid and some free. The Small Business Administration has a lot of resources and are very willing to help. Who is the audience? You might say, who is our target market for our business plan? And to some extent, those are the stakeholders. Certainly yourself. You want to know what you were thinking and write it down before that idea goes away. If you would like some partners or some key employees, they would prefer to join a successful organization or one with a high probability of success, so show them why they should join you. Equity investors, these are people who will own a portion of the organization, either active or passive. These are termed venture capitalists, angels. Debt investors, individuals, banks, finance companies, and other. Maybe the neighborhood, the community, certainly your wife or husband and family. These are the sections that are in Wake Tech's Business 245 business plan. These are the ones we felt were most applicable to someone starting a new small business, and also that would fit into a 16-week, one-semester time frame. Administrative parts are the title page, the table of contents, and the index. The sections are executive summary, the strategy, the product, target market, promotion, location, supply chain management, industry and competition, break-even analysis, market research, pricing, timeline, human resources / staffing, earning statement summaries, ownership form, licenses and registrations, SWOT analysis, financing, insurance, and then an appendix for the break-even analysis, an appendix for the constant sum research, an appendix for the survey research, and an appendix for the full earning statements. That's the business plan in Wake Tech's Business 245 Entrepreneurship II course. The sections that we've left out either because they were probably not important to a new small business, or because they were too complicated and there are other whole semester courses to cover them. Intellectual property, a management team, cash flow statements, balance sheet statements, sources and uses of funds statements, an exit strategy, a website, and manufacturing and operations. Besides the business plan itself, which is generally a Word document, there's also a presentation package, which is typically in PowerPoint. So the Word format business plan is a narrative. The PowerPoint format presentation package is where the entrepreneur will be presenting to one or more of those audiences I mentioned. They contain the same information. They should be in a nice clear font, Verdana, Arial, or Calibri. Occasional color or italic. Beyond that, they do differ somewhat. The business plan is generally a portrait orientation, lots of narrative sentences. It must be self-supporting. You're not going to be there. The font, probably 12 to 16 point, and occasional bold for emphasis. The presentation package is a landscape orientation. Bullet points. You'll be there to explain them. The font, 18 to 32 point, and all bold. So a couple of the keys here. Narrative sentences for the business plan, bullet points and bold font for the presentation package. For both, a couple pointers. Keep the topics organized and separate. The product ideas should be in the product section or slide. The promotion ideas should be in the promotion section or slide. 2 reasons. The audience then knows where to find this information, and if you have multiple entries of the same information, you're more likely to make errors and inconsistencies. That concludes the 1-hour introduction to entrepreneurship video. I hope you found it either useful or interesting. Both would be nice, of course. Feel free to contact me with any comments or questions.